Good morning, everybody, and let me first also congratulate BBGI for, I think, 5 years. It's an anniversary to some extent as well, and I think it's an anniversary where I think what we've heard early this morning from Philippe really shows that a lot has been achieved already. I wanted to talk a little bit about, first perhaps a little bit about things what have been achieved, but also perhaps a few of the things that may need to be done still. I think what we've seen so far is really that I think the forum has already done a lot of work. We actually produced a report in 2009, so 10 years ago, on the bioeconomy in 2030. And if I look at some of the recommendations from that report at that time, those are actually very much the things that I think the BBGI has been doing. Prepare the foundations for the long-term development of the bioeconomy, reverse the neglect, I think, of many countries in agriculture, industrial biotechnology, turning biotech into an economic advantage, reducing the barriers to biotech innovation, promote the integration of biotech research across commercial applications, and also create a dialogue across different policy areas. So I think, in a sense, if I look back at those recommendations, those are some of the things that I think we really see happening in BBGI. So in that sense, very hard for me not to be positive about what's been happening, I think, in this area. That being said, this is a difficult area. It depends on so many different policy areas that need to come together to make this work. And this is from a report we put out last year. You really need to work on the technology side, on the feedstock side, on the biomass side, a lot of policy areas that need to come together there. But also then a lot of things that need to come from the market side, from the demand side policies that need to be working together, and a number of cross-cutting issues like skills development, the regulatory side, standards, all of those things that need to come together. And that makes this complicated. I think this makes it complicated as well in a policy sense, at least what I see in the OECD. Cross-cutting areas are always hard because you need to bring different policy areas together. You need to bring different policy makers together. And that is always more difficult than being in a silo. Now, there are things, I think, that have been achieved, probably a few challenges as well. I've just put a few here. There are others, and these are not criticisms. These are things I think we need to work on. We still see probably in many countries missing players, that some key technology providers are not there, that some smaller firms are not there, that we still have a problem in many European countries with scaling of firms. It's not just there in the bioeconomy. It's an issue which I think is across Europe. Obviously as well, the bioeconomy to some extent is competing with very big established fossil fuels-based industries, sometimes also industries that are benefiting from a lot of public support. We still see a lot of fossil fuel subsidies, direct and indirect in many cases, that play a role. This is also about distributed small-scale production in many cases, which brings benefits, but also has real challenges, I think, with it that need to be addressed. And of course, the whole issue of regulation, waste, residues, how you deal with that, those are other things that are difficult. And I think the final one, which is really also about sustainability. I think we all see this possibly here in this room as an opportunity to deal with, but we still, I think, also need to provide the evidence that this can be sustainable, that this can be done in a green way, because we still don't always necessarily understand all the impacts, the long-term impacts. And I think if I look at the discussions which I'm having in colleagues with the OECD working in environmental policy, bioeconomy is still seen as something that's, is it really clean? Is it really green? Is it something which we really believe in? Partly because I think of the history of first-generation biofuels, which probably plays a role here. The other thing I think, which we see a little bit looking across countries, is that perhaps there is less discussion in the European context about engineering biology. Now, I'm not a chemist, a little bit like our moderator. I'm not a specialist in the area, but I think engineering biology is very much around sort of building some of the tools that can help you improve your processes later on when it gets to industrial biotechnology. What we see very clearly in Japan, for instance, has a new industrial strategy coming up, a biostrategy. This is very much core of what they want to do. You also see it very clearly in the United States, a bigger focus on sort of this engineering biology as sort of an input into the process, as something that can improve processes, can improve the productivity of the overall system, and take it forward. And yes, there are initiatives in Europe. We see things happening in the UK and in France and Germany, quite a few countries, but perhaps less emphasis that might be needed in this area. Other thing, and I spoke about this already, I think the whole sustainability of biomass is really key. And I think particularly we see the discussions at the moment about use of forests, we see the discussion about food, competition with food. We still probably have a lack of criteria, of good measures to know what is really sustainable in the long term. And that may be something to do more work on, to make sure you really are sure there is certification, there is clarity on that. So I think those are things to work on, because I think that will increase the confidence, that will increase also, I think, public perceptions in this area, and will make it easier, I think, to really make this even a bigger part of the discussions about the Green Deal and so on going forward. My final point is that this is about busting silos, and I think, again, I think a lot has been done, but it is hard to build those bridges, to go across all these areas, because you're bringing together here policy discussions and industries across many different areas. You're building an ecosystem, and that is just very hard. So to build those bridges across different areas. So more is needed, I think, there to make that happen. I think this is something that you see probably in some countries, some governments, where this is really very clearly the case. But it is something where probably more effort will still be needed to go forward. Finally, I think at the moment, at least what we see, and this is a chart from the International Energy Agency World Energy Outlook that came out a little while ago, you still see that if you look at some of the indicators, and this is just looking at the energy side, that things are not changing that quickly yet. That you still see that a lot of the investments that are being made still go to fossil fuels to some extent, and that they still go to sort of the more fossil fuels based industries, that we don't necessarily see the real shift that is going to be needed. So I think we need more. We need more, I think, initiatives like BBGI, probably more sort of focus on this to really take us forward and to make sure that we get that transition that is so needed. And again, I think we've heard already from the Commission that there are things coming our way. There are opportunities here in terms of the Green Deal, the whole discussion about industrial policy, but also I think the discussion about rural areas and rural regeneration that is so needed. So thank you all for your time. This is just my usual advertising for some of our work, but I look forward to our discussions and to the rest of the program. Thank you.